Hello, my wonderful friends. Today, I have something truly remarkable to share with you. Listen closely, because this story has the power to change the way you think, speak, and feel about the English language. He was the greatest psychologist the world has ever known, a man who understood the human heart like no other. You've surely heard of Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, and Othello. These are not merely tales, they are reflections of life itself. Love, power, betrayal, ambition, everything that makes us human captured in words. His influence runs so deep that English as we know it would not exist without him. Countless words, phrases, and ideas we use today were born from his imagination. But how did this man become William Shakespeare, the greatest writer in history? He wasn't born into wealth or privilege. He didn't attend a grand university. Yet somehow, he became the most celebrated name in literature. So, if you're learning English, struggling with words, or wondering how to express yourself, this story is for you. Shakespeare's journey began as an ordinary boy, no different from anyone else. It is a tale of hardship, passion, and unstoppable creativity. Sit back, listen carefully, and enjoy. Not only will it sharpen your English listening skills, but it will fill you with inspiration. It was a chilly April day in 1564, in a small English town called Stratford-upon-Avon, when a baby boy was born. His parents, John and Mary Shakespeare, held him close, unaware that their son would one day change the world. His name was William Shakespeare. Stratford-upon-Avon was no bustling city. It was a quiet market town, lined with narrow streets, timber houses, and a gentle river. People lived simple lives as farmers, traders, and craftsmen. William's father, John, was a glove maker who crafted fine leather goods and sold them at the market. Hard-working and respected, he was known for his craftsmanship. Mary, William's mother, came from a prosperous farming family. She was strong, kind, and full of love for her children. William was the third of 8 children, and the house was always filled with laughter, chatter, and noise. Yet, he was different. Quiet, curious, observant. He noticed everything, how people spoke, how they laughed, how they wept. Without realizing it, this curiosity would one day make him the greatest playwright of all time. In those days, there were no televisions, no phones, no internet. People entertained themselves with stories. Traveling performers would visit towns and act out plays in open squares. Young William watched in fascination, his eyes wide with wonder. He loved hearing old legends, folk tales, and heroic sagas. Each story fueled his imagination and strengthened his love for words. At 7, William began school. The classroom was small, with wooden benches and a strict teacher, yet what he learned there shaped his destiny. He studied Latin, history, poetry, and literature, the foundation of classical knowledge. Latin, the language of scholars, became one of his strengths. He read the great stories of Rome and Greece and discovered writers like Ovid, Plutarch, and Virgil. Their works would later echo through his plays. But William wasn't only a bookish child. He loved the outdoors, the green fields, the gentle river, and the songs of birds. He played with his friends, ran through the streets, and laughed freely. Yet deep within him lived a hunger for stories and meaning. When life seemed ordinary, trouble struck. John Shakespeare's business began to fail. Debts mounted, and the family, once comfortable, began to struggle, even to buy food. William saw the worry in his parents' eyes and learned early that life could be uncertain. But instead of despairing, he absorbed it all, turning pain into understanding, a lesson he would later weave into his plays. Even as a child, he had a gift for words. He made up little rhymes, acted out scenes, and entertained his friends. No one in Stratford-upon-Avon could have imagined that this curious boy would one day write the greatest stories the world has ever known. As the years passed, William grew quickly. By 14, he had devoured books, listened to countless tales, and watched traveling actors perform in his small town. Yet life at home grew more difficult. His father's financial troubles deepened, and the once respected businessman now faced mounting debts. The family, once comfortable, began to live with uncertainty. William saw how fragile life could be, how easily fortune could fade. But instead of bitterness, he developed resilience, empathy, and insight. These lessons would later breathe life into his most powerful characters. Then, something happened that would change everything. By 18, William was no longer a boy. He was a young man, full of dreams and emotions, and, like many young men, he fell in love. Her name was Anne Hathaway, a smart, beautiful, and independent woman. Yet their story was far from typical. Anne was 26, 8 years older than William. In those days, such a match was uncommon. Society frowned upon younger men marrying older women. But love has never cared for rules, and William's heart was already hers. Soon, news spread that Anne was expecting a child before their wedding, a serious scandal at the time. Society was strict, and an unmarried mother brought shame to her family. To protect their honor, the two married quickly, in November 1582. William was only 18. 6 months later, Anne gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Susanna. 2 years later, in 1585, the couple welcomed twins, Hamnet and Judith. By 21, William was a husband and a father of 3. But family life brought new challenges. His father's business had not recovered, and William had no stable income. He was young, ambitious, and restless, yet uncertain about the future. How could he support his growing family? He didn't want to follow his father into glove-making, and he had no wealth, title, or land. All he had were words, stories, imagination, and a burning desire to create. Then came the mysterious period historians call the Lost Years, from 1585 to 1592. For 7 years, no one truly knows where Shakespeare was or what he did. Records vanish, and his life becomes a mystery. Many theories exist. Some believe he became a schoolteacher, tutoring the children of wealthy families. Others suggest he joined a traveling theatre troupe, learning the craft of acting and writing. Some even claim he fled Stratford after being caught hunting illegally on a nobleman's land. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. When he reappeared in history, he was no longer just a young man from Stratford. By 1592, William Shakespeare had arrived in London, the beating heart of England's theatre world. The city was alive with energy, full of poets, actors, and dreamers all seeking fame. But London could be cruel. It was crowded, competitive, and unforgiving. William had no money, no friends in high places, and no guarantee of success. What he did have was talent, determination, and an unbreakable will to tell stories. He began humbly, working as an actor in small theatre groups. He studied everything: the gestures, the speech, the rhythm of dialogue. Soon, his pen began to move, and his words came to life. At first, he wrote light-hearted plays meant to entertain the crowd. But as he grew in confidence, he began to write stories that delved deeper, plays that made people think, feel, and question life itself. By the early 1590s, Shakespeare's name was spreading through London's theatre scene. But not everyone was pleased. A rival playwright, Robert Greene, mocked him in a bitter letter, calling him an upstart crow, implying he was a nobody pretending to be great. Yet William paid no attention. He worked harder, wrote more, and let his talent speak louder than the critics. Then in 1593, disaster struck. A deadly plague swept through London, killing thousands and forcing theatres to close. Shakespeare suddenly found himself without work. But where others despaired, he adapted. Instead of plays, he turned to poetry, writing 2 long narrative works, Venus and Adonis and the Rape of Lucrece. These poems brought him fame and financial stability, even catching the attention of Queen Elizabeth I herself. When theatres reopened in 1594, Shakespeare returned to the stage, stronger, wiser, and ready to shape history. From 1594 onward, Shakespeare became part of a celebrated acting troupe called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. He was no longer just a writer but also a performer, fully immersed in the world he loved. His plays grew richer and more complex, full of passion, tragedy, laughter, and truth. He began to write stories that captured the essence of being human. Romeo and Juliet spoke of love and destiny. Macbeth revealed the corruption of power and ambition. Hamlet explored madness, revenge, and the meaning of existence, and Othello exposed the poison of jealousy. Each play reflected life itself, the beauty, the pain, and the struggle of the human heart. By the late 1590s, Shakespeare had become one of England's most famous playwrights. His performances drew crowds from every corner of society, from humble workers to nobles and even members of the royal court. Yet, despite his growing fame, he was far from finished. His mind was alive with new ideas, new stories, and new dreams. He longed for a space where his imagination could thrive, a stage that belonged to him and his company alone. In 1599, that dream came true. Alongside his fellow actors, Shakespeare built a theatre that would become legendary, the Globe Theatre. Picture it, a vast, round building of timber with an open roof, alive with noise and anticipation. Audiences gathered by the thousands to watch his plays, cheering, laughing, and weeping as his words came to life. The Globe became more than a building. It was the home of Shakespeare's dreams. Here, he presented his greatest masterpieces: Hamlet, a haunting story of revenge and fate; Macbeth, a chilling tale of ambition and guilt; Othello, a tragedy of love twisted by jealousy; and Julius Caesar, a powerful reflection on betrayal and power. These were not just performances, they were mirrors held up to human nature. His words made people feel deeply and question the world around them. As success poured in, so did wealth. By the early 1600s, Shakespeare was not only admired but also rich and respected. He owned shares in the Globe, which brought him steady income, and earned money from published plays and poems sold throughout England. He invested in property and eventually bought a grand home in Stratford called New Place. At a time when most playwrights struggled to survive, he had achieved what few ever could: fame, fortune, and legacy. But change was on the horizon. In 1603, Queen Elizabeth I, who had long supported the arts, passed away. Her death cast uncertainty over the future of theatre. Yet when King James I took the throne, Shakespeare's fortune continued to rise. The new king adored his work and personally granted his company a royal title. They became the King's Men. It was the greatest honor a playwright could receive. They were now official actors of the royal court, performing before the most powerful people in England. Shakespeare, the son of a glove maker, had risen to the very heart of power and prestige. Between 1603 and 1611, he entered his final and most profound creative period. His plays grew darker, deeper, and more philosophical. King Lear revealed the pain of betrayal and the fragility of love. Macbeth explored the destructive hunger for power. The Tempest offered a vision of forgiveness, wisdom, and renewal. These works reflected not only his genius but also his maturity. Shakespeare had seen it all: fame and failure, loyalty and deceit, love and loss. His writing became a meditation on what it means to live and to let go. By 1611, Shakespeare had achieved everything he had ever dreamed of. He was admired by royalty, celebrated by the public, and remembered by his peers as the finest storyteller in history. Yet beneath his success, he longed for peace. After decades in London, he missed the quiet beauty of his hometown, Stratford-upon-Avon. In 1613, to everyone's surprise, he decided to retire. He left behind the noise of the city and returned home to his beloved Stratford, settling once again in his grand house, New Place. There, he spent his final years surrounded by nature, family, and quiet reflection. He would rise early, walk through his gardens, and sit by the river that once inspired his boyhood dreams. In the evenings, he would read, write short verses, and share gentle conversations with his daughters, Susanna and Judith. Visitors often came from London to seek his advice, and though he no longer performed, his mind remained full of stories. Even in his later years, those who saw him said he would sometimes sit for hours, lost in thought, whispering lines of poetry to himself, perhaps fragments of plays never written, ideas that drifted like ghosts through his mind. In 1616, fate took an unexpected turn. One evening, Shakespeare attended a dinner with close friends, an evening filled with laughter, wine, and conversation. Not long after, he fell ill. Some said it was a fever. Others believed it was an infection brought on by the damp English spring. Whatever the cause, his condition worsened quickly. His family gathered by his bedside, knowing that the greatest writer of their age was nearing his final breath. On April 23, 1616, at the age of 52, William Shakespeare passed away. The world had lost a voice unlike any other, but his words, his legacy, would never fade. Before his death, he wrote a few final lines to guard his resting place, fearing that his body might one day be moved. His epitaph, carved into his tombstone, read, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake, forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." Even in death, his words carried power, simple, direct, and unforgettable. When news of his passing spread through Stratford, the entire town fell silent. People gathered at Holy Trinity Church, the same place where he had been baptized as an infant, to say their final goodbyes. The church was crowded with actors, writers, friends, and humble townsfolk who had known him since childhood. There were no golden tombs or marble statues, just a simple grave, marked with the words he wrote himself. But his death was not the end. It was the beginning of a legacy that would outlive kings, empires, and centuries. Shakespeare's body may have rested in Stratford, but his voice refused to stay silent. His plays continued to be performed, his poems continued to be read, and his name continued to echo across the world. Years passed, then decades, then centuries, and still, his stories remained alive. His works were translated into nearly every language on earth. His characters, Romeo, Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, became immortal symbols of love, tragedy, power, and human weakness. His influence spread through literature, theatre, and beyond. Writers, poets, filmmakers, and musicians drew inspiration from him. His words slipped naturally into everyday speech. Phrases like "to be or not to be," "all the world's a stage," and "a rose by any other name would smell as sweet" became part of the human vocabulary. Shakespeare's genius was not simply in his command of language, but in his understanding of human nature. He wrote about emotions that never grow old, love that defies the world, ambition that destroys the soul, jealousy that blinds reason, and fate that humbles the proud. His characters were flawed yet real, noble yet human. In their joy and sorrow, we continue to recognize ourselves. His plays remind us that love can be both beautiful and heartbreaking, like Romeo and Juliet. They teach that ambition, if left unchecked, can consume even the strongest hearts, like Macbeth. They show that betrayal often comes from those closest to us, like Julius Caesar. And they whisper that life itself is full of mystery and doubt, like Hamlet. Through every line, he revealed the timeless truth of being human. If Shakespeare could speak to us now, his message would be simple yet powerful. Dream boldly, tell your story, and never stop believing in yourself. For he, too, began as a small-town boy from Stratford-upon-Avon, a boy with no wealth, no connections, and no promise of greatness. But he had one thing that changed everything, a dream. And that dream transformed the world. Now, it is your turn. The same spark that burned in Shakespeare burns within you. You have a story waiting to be told, a voice the world needs to hear. Don't let fear hold you back. Don't let doubt silence your gift. You are stronger, wiser, and more capable than you think. Every great journey begins with a single step, and every masterpiece begins with a single word. Like Shakespeare, dare to dream beyond what seems possible. Work with passion. Keep learning, keep creating, and never give up. Because the truth is, greatness is born in ordinary places, in ordinary people who refuse to give up. So, my dear friends, remember this. Greatness often begins quietly. It begins in small towns, in modest homes, within the hearts of dreamers who refuse to stop believing. Shakespeare was not born into fortune or fame. He built his destiny with words, courage, and imagination. His story proves that where you start does not define where you can go. Imagine young William again, the curious boy wandering through the streets of Stratford, watching actors perform in the market square, listening to the laughter and sorrow of the people around him. He did not know that each sound, each face, each emotion would one day shape immortal plays. What he carried, above all, was wonder, the simple curiosity to understand the world and the courage to turn what he felt into art. That is why his voice still reaches us today. When you read his words or hear them spoken on a stage, it feels as though he is still here, whispering through time. His lines have crossed oceans, survived wars, and outlived empires because they speak to something eternal within every human being, the longing to love, to dream, to matter. Over 400 years later, his plays still fill theatres around the globe. His books are studied in schools, his words quoted in films, songs, and speeches. Each generation rediscovers him in new ways. Directors reimagine his stories, actors bring new life to his characters, and audiences continue to feel the same emotions that once moved crowds in the globe. That is the power of timeless art. It belongs to everyone and to every age. Shakespeare taught us that words can change everything. They can heal, inspire, and awaken something powerful inside us. Through his writing, he showed that the human heart has no limits. He made the language of everyday life beautiful and alive. The way he saw love, conflict, and destiny still shapes the way we express ourselves today. His influence can be felt in every poem, every story, every speech that dares to explore the human soul. He also taught us that failure, hardship, and doubt are not the end. They are the beginning of greatness. When his father lost everything, William learned resilience. When London's theatres closed because of the plague, he reinvented himself through poetry. When critics tried to humiliate him, he answered not with anger but with brilliance. Every obstacle became a spark for creation. That is the true strength of a creator, to rise, adapt, and keep moving forward. If you ever feel lost or discouraged, think of Shakespeare. Think of how he faced uncertainty, how he wrote by candlelight in cold rooms, how he believed his words could reach beyond his lifetime. And they did. His story is not only about art, it is about perseverance. It is about trusting that your voice matters, even when the world doesn't yet hear it. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson he left us. Our destinies are not written in the stars, they are written in our choices. We shape our own paths, just as he did. His famous line reminds us of this truth. It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves. So ask yourself, what dream lives in you? Maybe you wish to be a writer, an actor, a leader, a teacher, or a creator who touches lives. Whatever your dream may be, nurture it. Feed it with learning, patience, and courage. Shakespeare began with nothing but a dream, and that dream changed history. Yours can too. You don't need permission to start. You don't need perfect conditions or a guarantee of success. All you need is to take the first step, to write that line, create that work, share that idea. Each small act brings you closer to the extraordinary. Let Shakespeare's story be more than inspiration. Let it be a reminder that you have within you the same fire, the same creative force, the same infinite possibility. He once turned words into worlds. Now, it's your turn. My amazing friends, the story of William Shakespeare is more than history. It's a mirror, showing us what we can become when we dare to dream without fear. His journey from a modest boy in Stratford to the greatest writer in history teaches us that no dream is too big, and no beginning too small. He began with nothing but his imagination, and from that spark he built a legacy that still lives centuries later. His words connected hearts across time, reminding us that language is not just communication, it is creation. Every sentence he wrote carried emotion, wisdom, and truth. He showed that the right words can move nations, comfort souls, and change how people see the world. And now, the same power lies in your hands. You may not write plays for kings or perform before crowds, but your words, your ideas, your voice, all have meaning. Whether you create art, build, teach, or inspire others, you too can shape your world. That is what Shakespeare's story proves, that greatness begins with belief. There will always be challenges. People may doubt you. Fear may whisper that you are not ready. But remember, Shakespeare faced those same voices. He lived in uncertain times, through plague, failure, and criticism, yet he never stopped writing. He never stopped believing that what he had to say mattered. So, when you face your own doubts, remember him. Remember that courage is not the absence of fear, it is moving forward in spite of it. That is how all creators, all dreamers, all leaders are born. Look around you. The world is waiting for new voices, new stories, new ideas. Maybe yours will be the one that inspires others the way Shakespeare's did. Maybe your work will carry light to someone who needs it. Every act of creation, no matter how small, adds something beautiful to this world. You don't need to be perfect to begin. Shakespeare wasn't. His plays were rewritten, his lines revised, his words sometimes misunderstood, but he kept going. And because he did, millions of lives were touched forever. What matters is not perfection, it is persistence. So, let his story awaken something inside you. Whatever your dream is, write it, live it, pursue it. You have that same fire that once burned in him. Let it grow. Let it push you forward even when the path feels uncertain. The truth is, you are far more powerful than you realize. And if ever you doubt it, remember his legacy. Words outlast time. They travel beyond death, beyond borders, beyond generations. The boy from Stratford-upon-Avon proved that the human spirit can speak forever through art. You can, too. Now, as you finish this story, take a moment to think of what it means to you. Shakespeare's life ended long ago, but his influence continues because people like you keep his words alive, by reading, by learning, by dreaming. Every time you dare to believe in yourself, his story continues. So, my friends, go and write your own chapter. Be bold, be curious, be unstoppable. The world needs your voice. The world is waiting for your story. And as Shakespeare once wrote, we know what we are, but know not what we may be. Believe in who you are becoming. Create, grow, and shine. Your journey, just like his, has the power to inspire generations. The stage is yours now. Step into the light, speak your truth, and let your words, like his, live forever. Stay inspired. Stay unstoppable. The world is listening.